This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. All right. Good morning, Kelly.
Morning, Ethan. How are you today?
Little tired, but it's just living dad life plus being sick.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah, well, it's because you have two little petri dishes running around.
Yeah.
Little germ spreaders. They're like those fog machines that just spit out stuff that goes everywhere.
And then they're just like coughing all night, so you're like, a part of you is like, you can't help but worry because you hear them coughing so bad at night.
I remember when I got sick, I felt better the next day in school, and I'd go back to school. Nowadays, if the child is sick, they have to be symptom-free for 24 hours before they go back. So
Okay.
now you're talking about kids that can't go back for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. And that's on like the minor stuff.
Yeah.
If you get like a bad cough, I mean, you could be coughing for a week at least. Wow.
It's crazy.
At least we got more capabilities with like online learning and stuff.
Yeah. But is the online learning integrated with what they're doing?
I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
It could be.
Is it in alignment with? I don't know.
There's definitely the technology to do it.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. But I don't know that, like, how long do they have to be out, before they're offered that as an option? Yeah, I don't know. I remember periodically, we didn't have sick kids. They went to school most every day. I mean, once in a while, but not for an extended period of time. They would, every once in a while, we'd have to go pick up their homework or something. But that was about it. So it was before online stuff. My kids are old, your age.
I was going to say, aren't they like my age?
All right.
Am I considered old now?
Well, for a child.
What? Okay. Yeah. It's all relative. So I'm going to try to do this without coughing a whole lot. So we'll get into a few articles here. They all kind of have a very similar theme, as you'll find out. So first article I have for you is a student was taken to the hospital after being stabbed by another student on a school bus.
How'd they get there? The bus take them there, or does it not say?
That's a good question.
So are we going to talk about these individually or collectively? If there's
maybe the first, I can talk about two maybe collectively, and then one is kind of a mix of bus and bullying a little bit. Either way, I'll just run through all of them. We can talk about them all collectively. Sounds probably better. Relatively simple kind of thing here, but I mean, just crazy that this violence is taking place before they even get into the school. And then the other article that I was trying to find, it was a video I saw on Facebook, and oddly enough, I can't find the article, but from what I believe, it seemed to be pretty authentic, pretty true. It was kind of one of those situations where you have, and we've talked about this, where you have multiple like age ranges that will get on a bus. So it was like a younger student that got sat next to an older student. I don't remember what happened, but the older student essentially like almost suffocated the younger student like to death. So that was pretty nuts.
Like, what was the manner there when you say suffocated versus choking?
Like sat on him or something like that. Like, it wasn't with the hands, I remember, but it was like just the older student was so much bigger that they like crushed him or something like that. It was kind of odd, but it was definitely intentional. for sure. Maybe not suffocating to the point of death may have not been intentional, but it didn't go that far, thankfully. But still, nuts. And then the last one, definitely the worst one because of its outcome, unfortunately. So there was a fight, or not a fight, but a student was being bullied on the bus, and it seems like the bus, from what I'm reading, dropped off the students at the bus stop, and they continued to bully this student to the point where it seems like they essentially had shoved her to the ground, and she hit her head on the ground hard enough that she went unconscious, stopped breathing. At some point, looks like either the aunt or the mom came out and brought her to the hospital, and then she started seizing, and then she actually passed away at the hospital. But it essentially started on the bus. Obviously has a little bit of a bullying element there. So yeah, all three things are bus safety related outside of the school.
Yep.
But still
So
part of the school.
we've talked about bus safety in the past and how
Yep.
buses are not just transport vessels, they're an extension of the school. And we talked about how everything that happens in the school happens on the bus, and because it's an extension of that. And so when you're talking about the protection of children at school, it essentially doesn't mean a location. It means when you're in the care of the school district. So, and that's when the parent hands the child over, however that happens, to the school. That means on a bus. That means when they're going through the pickup line or drop off line, there you go. Right? And in some cases, and there was many years ago, so it's nothing new, but there was a whole campaign about safer routes to school. And the law enforcement was involved, schools were involved, parents, communities were involved with how do we make it safer for kids to get to school. Sometimes, depending on history, sometimes that was just how do you safely ride your bike to school or safely walk to school, cross the street, that kind of stuff. But as we know, society has gotten more violent. So now we're talking about violent behavior, gang behavior, bullying. I don't want to get into all of the nuances of bullying, but just understand this. When there is a lack of parental or adult supervision, there's a greater opportunity to be bullied or to bully. And so when you're talking about between home and the schools, you're talking about that opportunity. And I mean, you got to take measures to keep your kids safe, whatever that means. If it means dropping them off at school or what have you. But when we're talking about specific, when there's a custodial change, and why I say custodial change, because there is legally a custodial change when you hand your child over to the custody of the school. They have a legal and a moral obligation to protect all students from harm, just like you would if you were your actual parent. I have a duty to protect my child from harm. And oftentimes, our schools, and trust me, I think the majority of them are doing this correctly, but oftentimes they use this law intermittently, depending on how it benefits the individual or the school. Right? So, but you have a duty. We've talked about this pretty frequently because oftentimes it comes into the conversation of I'm their parent when I'm at school, when your child at school, as a reason for doing something or an excuse for doing something that the parents don't necessarily agree with. But there is a duty to care for the kid, the child, and there are consequences if you don't do that effectively.
So that's a good transition into the article that I want to go over that'll kind of lead us into kind of the main question that I have for you. So there was an article put out, I think it was just a couple days ago. Yep. This event actually occurred last year, but now it's at the point where it's in the courts. That's the correct way to say that.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what happened is an 8-year-old started choking, and instead of addressing the child like choking on, just choking, and then like they sent the kid to the bathroom. The teacher or whoever was there sent the kid to the bathroom instead of like stopping the kid from choking. The kid died because he basically died in the bathroom by himself, and it's like super sad. And it's so now this is it's going to court, obviously.
Lawsuit,
as a parent. Yeah, so it just kind of blows my mind. So I guess the question this prompts is, and this might be controversial, but should we start looking at like mandating that teachers have some level of like safety credentials like within their like learning? So like you have to get like a certificate to be a teacher, right? So should it be part of the certificate that you need some amount of hours of like specific coursework in terms of safety? And I don't mean like this is beyond like, because I think even this teacher had like the AED training and like the CPR training and stuff. I'm talking about like the things that we talk about on the podcast. Should they have to do some amount of hours of that kind of education?
So again, we've talked about this because this is in Kelly's world.
Yeah. I want to just dive deeper into it. I want to like,
sure.
What would that look like? Is it even feasible? Is it like far-fetched?
It's not far-fetched. If you're mandated to be certified in anything to do that job, you're going to get certified. So it's not far-fetched, and it's not difficult. It's an added semester or two, depending on how deep you want to get into it. It just seems silly to me that we're not there. So here's the way that I would structure this, and then we can get into the specifics. I believe that certified teachers in our public schools across the nation should be educated in not just what they are teaching, but what they can expect to do throughout the day as part of their job. And I'm going to add this further. The administration should be certified in how to support that, because it becomes a whole ecosystem of things that have to occur. But we'll try to stay in this lane a little bit. But I do believe that if you are expected to do something on a regular basis as part of your job, then you should be trained in that. We are as law enforcement. One of the biggest scams, other than just going to college, that I know in the higher education is many people have a criminal justice degree or a law enforcement degree or a firefighter's degree or whatever, fire science, something like that. And that many of the institutions are saying you need this to get hired at a law enforcement agency or a fire agency. And that's not the truth. The truth is most places require a high school education. Some require some sort of degree, but it can be any degree, not just law enforcement. You don't need a law enforcement or a criminal justice or an administration of justice degree to get hired to be a law enforcement officer.
So I could go and apply to be a law enforcement officer? That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, where do you think they come from? The community, right?
That's not making me feel any better.
Well, but it's one of the unique things about law enforcement is they're hired from the
Oh, man.
community, right? They're not
Yeah,
hired from the
that's right.
military. They're not, you don't have to go into the military. A lot of people who are in the military go into the public
That's
service,
true.
but
Yeah.
that doesn't, in many countries, law enforcement is part of the military. I will train you as a law enforcement administrator. I will train you in everything that you need to know. We send you to a 6-month academy. And then after that, we train you at each level. If you want to become a detective, I send you to investigation school. If you want to be a homicide investigator, I send you to homicide investigations. If you want to be a crime scene investigator, I send you to CSI school.
I figured on the crime scene one, you'd just like throw them into a crime scene just to see if they could like handle it.
Well, that might be the first step first.
Like, all right, let's see if you can actually handle it, and then go from there.
Yeah. If you want to be a supervisor or a lieutenant, I send you to supervisor school or management school. I mean, we don't just say, here, go to the police academy and then forget you. And I think that's the same in education. I'm not just teaching you how to write a ticket. I'm teaching you everything that you are likely going to come into contact with and have to have some competency at.
Yeah.
So
you probably need some high, conflict resolution skills.
Right. And defensive tactics and firearms training and all these things. We don't just teach you how to write a ticket and make an arrest, right? So if you translate that over or transfer that over into the education world, I don't want you just to teach. I want you to do all these other things. And I know we're going to get some comments. We do so much more. Have you been trained in it? We do a lot of stuff that we just expect you to do because you know it or you should know it, right? And so where I'm going with this is it's been my mantra, not really a mantra, but if I could impact school safety in any way, this is what I would do to have the greatest impact is to require every educator, certified educator, to have as part of their initial education, they have to be certified in school safety and security at the level that they are teaching at.
So you mean like elementary, middle school, high school?
So I mean teaching, you have a certain responsibility in safety and security. And if you become a counselor, that requires a different certification. So now I want, in order for that person to be a counselor, I want that person to get all of the required stuff and an additional level of security and safety, right? And most counselors and psychologists will say something to this effect, is we are not necessarily qualified. Like when we have somebody who's struggling, we send them to the counselor or to the school psychologist, right? Their purpose is to guide them, which is why they call them guidance counselors, is to guide them through their academic pathway, academic career. Make sure they're on par, they're advancing as they should, et cetera, et cetera. But when somebody starts failing and they send them to the counselor, but it's not because of the academics, it's because of some emotional or some other means. The guidance counselor is not necessarily equipped to spot that or figure that out. And I'll explain that in a little bit. School psychologists are not threat management psychologists, but oftentimes we send we want the school psychologist in the threat assessment team to help us with the human behavior aspect of what's going on. Tell me what's going on. How do we, most of the time they won't know. You need to have a school psychologist. Now, getting back to the guidance counselor is when we have an issue of behavior and the behavior exhibited looks like an academic concern. But at the same time, that behavior might be an area of concern on the pathway to violence.
Yeah, you've talked about how the pathway is parallel.
Parallel, that's right. In many cases, not all. Some are strictly on the pathway to violence, and some are strictly on the pathway to academic failure. But at many times, when you examine the behaviors, it's pretty simple to say they're very similar, right? From a lay person, I'm going, wow, those are identical.
Yeah, like your indicators of what stage they're at, or
Yeah. And, so that when we're looking at changes in behavior, we're looking at exhibitions of behavior that are concerning to us, risky, disruptive, change of clothing, acting out, bucking authority, that kind of thing, and making idle threats and so forth as it starts to escalate. They're on the same pathway, right? The pathway to academic failure is very similar to a point, as is the pathway to violence. And we just have to distinguish between those. So when we get back to our main topic is certification, is how do they train or get certified in identifying the differences between those behaviors? Is the student going down the academic pathway or the violence pathway? How do the academic failure pathway? So how do we do that? I look for the violence side of it. So it's easy for me to say, I'll put it into this context. The academic failure context, it's very easy for them to say, oh, this is just going down this pathway. But at some point, we have to say and ask this question: does this also equal the other? Right? Yeah. Is the pathway of academic failure causing this person to act out violently because they're frustrated, their coping skills aren't good? Or is the pathway to violence causing them to act out and fail academically because they've given up or what have you, right? So having that certification. Now, if you're going to be an assistant principal or a vice or a principal, then that changes your requirement, your scope. So you need to be certified in school safety at that level. And many people are going to say, yeah, but it's so different between all of the schools. Yeah, I don't think it is. How you actually administer it might be different, but the responsibility, the overarching responsibility is the same.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not that difficult. Obviously, I say obviously, and I'm probably overstating the ease of this, or the obviousness of this, is it won't happen until there's a mandate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
And it won't happen. And here's the other end of it. It won't happen until the education system can make money off it. People are going to, they charge you for everything.
Yeah.
If it's
nothing's
not
free. Yeah.
Nothing's free.
Yeah. I like that though. I like the thought of, you have different kind of specified courses, if you will, depending on what you're trying to go for. Whether you just want to be a teacher, you want to be principal, you want to be this, you want to be that. That your safety courses might be a little bit different.
Your scope is changing every time you advance, right?
And that makes sense, because it's like, even like, when I went to school, it's like there was like marketing, and there was like, you have your business degree, and then there was like business sales, and then there was like a business marketing.
Yep.
So, and you can kind of go different paths.
Yeah, there's a management, a business administration, right?
Yep.
So there's different levels and in fact, in the whole education system, there's AA degrees, there's bachelor's degrees, there's, depending on theoretically what you want to do, the precedence is set, master's degrees and whatchamacallits, doctorates. So the precedence is set. In order for people to advance, they require certain certifications, certain advanced education. So in many cases, you have to have in order to be eligible to teach, you have to have a certification. That doesn't necessarily mean a bachelor's degree, but it usually does, but it doesn't necessarily. And if you're looking at those advances, it goes all the way up to the superintendent, right? And especially if they follow the normal pathway, they're going to get all of those advancing certifications as they matriculate through their careers, right? So they were all once educators, right? And it's amazing to me, and I'm just going to say this, and people are going to not agree with me, but we had it in law enforcement as well. And I think it's changing a little bit in law enforcement. I don't think it's changing in schools. Maybe it is. But every department in a school is run by an educator, either current or former educator. Do you see the problem with that?
Maybe like a bias? Is that what you're referring
Maybe.
to? A different, not similar perspective? Maybe you want those different.
So there's every department.
Take guesses.
Yeah. And I wanted you to. The educators, so let's break down the departments within a school. And you can see where I'm going with this. Special education, elementary school, secondary school, human resources, business, facilities, transportation. Do you see the problem now? IT?
That they're not necessarily specialized in those fields.
That's correct.
Am I getting closer? Am I getting warmer?
That's correct.
I mean, it's probably not always true, but I mean, if they are former educators, then yeah.
So the idea is that everything revolves.
You're saying that maybe those fields don't always necessarily require that they have a specialized skill in that field. Like if you're
well, let me sort of reverse that statement on you. It doesn't require them to have specialized training.
Okay.
In some areas that are very specialized, human resources, and had I not been there for 5.5 years in human resources, I wouldn't have this perspective, is such a unique part of an organization. You have to have somebody who is in charge of that, understanding all of those things. Now, and oftentimes people are just promoted and they're put in to that, and then they learn to figure it out. Well,
I mean, a lot of times we run into, it's like, what's your role? That's a lot of the question we always ask people at conferences and stuff. And I mean, how many times do we hear, oh, hey, I'm this, but I'm also in charge of safety.
Right. And some of
how many times have we heard that?
So, and some of those are completely
different.
Completely different.
Yeah.
We've seen people who are gym teachers. We have seen assistant superintendents. My boss, and I'm going to say she did it right. She knew enough to know that she didn't know it. And she didn't try to fumble her way through it. And that's how my job was created and how I was hired. She knew that she was over her head. Right.
Yeah, that's good humility right there.
Right. And so she hired me. The problem is that when they hired a safety coordinator, they had two different functions. Well, they had several different functions, but like schools, and I'm assuming this is pretty common, if anything that was related to safety, it fell under my purview. So what's the problem with that, you say?
Everything has to do with safety.
Well, and there are things that require certain certifications.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yep.
By law, by OSHA, they require certain certifications. But they just said, hey, Kelly, you're the safety coordinator. You figure this out. And one of the things that killed me when I found out about this, we had a middle school chemistry teacher who spilled some acid or something on herself.
Oh,
so
man.
Then obviously the teachers union flamed out on it, and there was some things going on. And I said, okay, so what do you want me to do? Well, you need to take care of this. I said, yeah, that's a OSHA thing, and it's a hazardous materials thing, and it relates to the proper storage and handling of chemicals. How did she get into that situation was my first question. And they go, well, they're not really, chemistry teachers aren't necessarily trained in how to handle chemicals.
What?
What? So, or the proper storage of chemicals.
I feel like that would
Yes,
be like day one
you
of
would
what
think.
you would be teaching your students
You would think.
on how to handle chemicals.
So I
What?
said, look, this is
That's crazy.
way outside of my purview.
Wow.
And so we ended up hiring they call them industrial hygienists. And so they came in and did an assessment and provided training and so forth. But the only reason I knew that is because of my prior experience in special operations where I dismantled meth labs. And so I had some hazardous materials training. I was a low level certified hazardous materials person, but I knew enough to say,
Gotcha.
yeah, this is not me. Right. And so I forced them to hire industrial hygienists. And then I was asked to do some training on lawnmower safety.
Lawnmower safety.
Lawnmower safety.
Okay.
Uh,
I feel like as
do-
a dad, I mean, you should just know that. But
well, as a person, you should know that. But to be certified to say I gave them training, that's not part of that job. But that's what
yeah,
ends up happening, is my point, is they just start, oh, this is safety. You do this, Kelly. You do this, Kelly.
anything that had the word safety. Okay.
Or a safety concern. We have to understand what that safety means. But again, I think there's that requirement. I think we have to, from our context, I think we have to first aid. I think there has to be stop the bleed classes, certification. I think there has to be how do you identify a threat classes. I think there has to be physical security classes. I'm not saying you have to be certified in each one of those, but it should be part of this relatively low level certification process to become a
Yeah.
teacher, right?
That was
Because,
my next question is like, what do you think the core classes would look like?
right? So
I'm sure one of your classes would be something around left of fang.
it's all around, it's around all of those phases, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think I've seen here, I certainly saw it in my experience at the school district, is we make the assumption that everyone knows what an emergency protective action is. They might not know what that, if I call it an EPA or an emergency protective action, they might go, what do you mean? Because not everyone calls it that. But when you look at it, and it's any action that you take in an emergency to protect yourselves and others. That's the definition. So what I'm really talking about when you're talking about the standard response protocols with the I Love You Guys foundations, those are all emergency protective actions. And
Yep.
we make the assumption that everyone knows what that is, regardless of what it's called. So I Love You Guys didn't invent lockdown. They didn't invent secure. They didn't invent any of it. It's all been there for many, many years. What they did was standardize what it meant, what a lockdown was, what you call it. But we have this assumption that you know what that is. And we tell people to hit the button for a lockdown. And then you get the question, or then what do we do?
Yeah.
Right? You go into
You
lockdown.
just sit there and
What does that look like?
wait for help, right?
Right. So we make that assumption. So I want to take that assumption away and force people to understand that at a minimum what the SRPs are by mandate. They should know everyone, and they should understand the circumstances in which each one of those is used and whether or not you can stack them. Can you use a lockdown and a hold? Yes. There's no reason you can't. You can stack them. You can use them you can elevate them. You can de-escalate them, right? So you can move up and down. They're completely flexible, but they should understand that. They should understand what it means to have a secure building. They should understand
Lock your doors.
What's that?
I said, lock your doors.
Lock your doors.
I was at a conference and someone came up to me and said, "Oh, we're still working on
locking our doors." Right? And was that the same one that said, "How do you notify somebody?" We yell down the hall. We have a small school. We just yell down the hall.
No, that was a different person.
Different person. But you get where I'm going, right?
Yeah.
And so when we look at the assumption that our teachers know how to keep our kids safe, we're wrong. So we have to take that assumption away. So basic first aid, Heimlich,
I think a lot of them have to do that, right? That's
CPR, AED. So it depends. I think it depends on the state, and the other thing is the continued certifications, right? So once you can't just train them 2 days out of college and then never train them again. It wasn't yearly. I had to go through CPR training and first aid training as a law enforcement officer every 2 or 3 years, right? So there was in the state of California for law enforcement, they had advanced training, and then they had what they called perishable skills. There was some training that was certified once and you were good to go. There was other training that was what they called perishable skills. So if you didn't keep up on the new stuff, you lost it. So as an example, firearms training, you had to qualify, I think it was once a year was the mandate. The sheriff's department, we did it quarterly. So we had to qualify every quarter. But I think the actual mandate was once annually. So that was a perishable skill. First aid was a perishable skill. Pursuit driving was a perishable skill. All of these things we had to continue. And I think you have to look at those areas in school safety and security and say, okay, who's responsible in the system, in the hierarchy for this? Teachers are frontline personnel. So they're your first ones that are likely going to see it. So let's get that going. If you have a yard duty, a bus driver, custodian, you're going to look at those and say, if you want to be here, you have to have X, Y, and Z. You have to know how to report it. You have to know how to mitigate it. If you start seeing something like the door open, you have to say, oh, that's concerning. Let's go lock that. And those types of things. But I think for me, it would be at least a semester, and you would start pushing these things off. Okay, this week we're going to do emergency protective actions. This week we're going to do this for your entire semester, and start banging off those in that kind of format. And when you go for certification, you seek out the education, and as part of your checklist for that education, it includes the role that you're trying for. So when you get certified, you're trying to get, or you further your education, it's the one that you're trying for. And so that when you come into it, you have a minimum level. The other thing that this does for us, other than it actually makes our schools safer, because now they understand that it's part of their job, and I will never hear again, Kelly, this isn't my job. I'm an English teacher. I will never hear that again, which is one of, as a tenured principal, was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. This is not my job. I'm an English teacher. No, you're a principal. You stopped being an English teacher as soon as you signed on the line that said you wanted to be a principal.
Yep.
And that comes with responsibility. So we have to tell everybody, we have to identify exactly what we think they're responsible for and train them in that. I don't think that's too much to ask. I, of course, have lots of stories there, but I don't think that's too much to ask. And so you ask, okay, so we're addressing all the new people with certifications. What about the ones that already exist?
Mm.
So at some point, you got to say, all right, every new teacher is going to come in with a minimum standard. So as they're in the system longer and longer, you're going to get more and more people that
Yeah.
have that minimum standard, right?
Sure.
But then you have to address the ones that are still there, because at some point you are going to have them and you don't have them, right? So there's this line of demarcation that says, okay, you guys aren't certified and you are, and then give them a period of time to get certified.
Yep.
Or provide that certification pathway for them by hiring people who can train them and work through that. It's going to take a little bit of time, but yeah, I think you just have to work through it. And we've talked about this, and we see this in almost every instance now where something happened to my child and you're going to get sued over it. And the many districts hide behind this immunity clause. They're immune from, but generally speaking, that doesn't apply if you are negligent or
Yeah.
deliberate. I think you're going to see more of that. And if you think training your teachers is expensive, wait till you get the lawsuit. It's like everything else. It's a process. I wish we could get our legislators to mandate that responsibility, because you said left of bang, right? So if you want to be truly left of bang, we have to train our troops. We have to train them to identify patterns of behavior. You can walk into a school in 5 minutes. You can look and say, oh, this is pretty normal. Or you can, especially a teacher who's there every day, what's going on today? There's something in the air. There's something going on. And sometimes that's cyclical. Every year, springtime, we used to get not nervous, but we were just acutely aware that there was going to be more fights at all the high schools. Something about the spring we were going to get. So you understand the cycle that happens in the school world, even if you're not in the school world. But if you're in it, you understand, and you know what's normal for that time. You know what's normal for that school, and you know what's abnormal. Now we have to teach you how to interpret that and to make sure that you understand what you're looking for. And can you spot when you see something abnormal, what it means, and put it into a context, and what do we do? So from that perspective, I think we have to teach left of bang to people, maybe not specifically left of bang, but the concepts of and what it means to take action before something happens, as opposed to waiting for something to happen and saying, oops.
Yeah.
Right. And you go back to,
because you're always just addressing the symptom, really,
well, you're not even addressing the symptom. You're
and just
going after
acknowledging it.
You're going after somebody who already has cancer.
Yeah.
Right. It's just silly to me. That we're getting 27 years and we're not talking about the individuals within our schools, what their responsibility is. Actual responsibility. You are responsible for this, and this. So anybody who has heartache, give me a call. I'm happy to discuss that with you. And I will argue against people who say it's not part of my job. We shouldn't have to do this. We're not cops. We don't want the cops in the schools. I will argue that if you don't want them, that's fine. But now you've taken whatever it was that they were doing. Now it's your responsibility, right? And for 27 years, next month, I think, April, yep, about a month away, 27 years, and we still have people saying, it's not my responsibility. Do we think they should be certified? Yep, I do. I'd be happy to help with that process.
I think you'd be an influential part of that, for sure. Maybe one day, maybe that would be your next endeavor of being a
I don't have that many endeavors left. So
Kelly, the professor of safety. There you go.
I'm not an expert in all that stuff. And I'm not an expert in creating curriculum, but I would certainly say, this is what we got to do. So we have to solve that problem. Sit down and look at it. Yep. What's the problem? And go through
I think it's a huge part of it, for sure.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.